Welcome to this introduction. My name's Barry Beckham and the subject here is Photoshop CS-6, shooting and manipulating raw files. The pictures you're going to see here are there just to give us something to view as we go through this introduction. The one thing they all have in common, of course, is they've all been through a camera raw process using the same techniques that we're going to cover on this disc. Shooting raw allows us to add that wow value to a much greater proportion of our photographs than we could ever achieve with JPEG images. It allows us to do this by giving us a far greater flexibility over the exposure we've taken in our camera. Not a global change over the whole image, but in selected areas, just where we need it. But I suppose we could ask the question, why do we need to do this? Well, it's because our camera almost never captures a perfect exposure across the entire image. You only have to tilt your camera slightly up or down while composing a landscape or a seascape to see the exposure change, sometimes quite radically. If one landscape can vary in exposure that much with a slight tilt up or down, then what is the correct exposure that we should have given? Well, there may not be one. It's more likely to be a compromise exposure between the two parts or more, and that is why we need the flexibility of shooting raw. Working with raw files changes our workflow from the moment we press the shutter button to the final image being completed. Once we gain some experience of manipulating raw images, you may even find that, like us, shooting raw will even influence your photographic workflow before you press the shutter button. Some people ask why they should bother shooting raw, and we've heard it said that all it does is add another level of manipulation and a lot of extra learning just to get to a position we could have been in when we pressed the camera shutter button. I think this is far too simplistic a view of camera raw, shooting raw, manipulating raw. But if you felt this way about shooting raw files, then by all means stay with your high resolution JPEGs. I could say that if you do think along these lines, then why are you listening to this introduction about shooting raw? Now, I suspect there may be some doubt in your mind, and maybe you're thinking, well, perhaps there is something to this camera raw after all. However, shooting raw images isn't compulsory, and you're free to leave this presentation at any time. But be warned that you're giving up a considerable advantage. We can effectively take the raw image we've shot, which, when we think about it, is just computer data, and in the calm surroundings of our home and computer room, we can make the final adjustments that will make our good pictures great, to add the impact and that wow factor that we're looking for. Best of all with raw files is we always have the original raw file to go back to and manipulate it again if we want to. It's a bit like having a roll of film that we can develop a number of times, and each time we can change our technique and create a better result, or maybe just to create something different. What we mustn't do is to use camera raw to put right exposure mistakes that should have been spotted and corrected at the time we pressed the shutter button. There is still no substitute for getting the exposure as good as possible, but it's not always that easy to do in some tricky lighting conditions. But common sense does tell us that if we start off working with a better image, then we're going to end up with a better image. There is one thing to remember though. We are all human, and from time to time, despite our best laid plans, we do make an exposure error. But as long as that error isn't catastrophic, then perhaps we can deal with that in camera raw too. On this disc we're going to cover lots of RAW techniques, and we guarantee they're going to improve your images and your photography in general. Now let me tell you just a little bit about the disc to make sure you get the best from it. The videos on this disc are MP4 videos designed to run on Windows and Mac PCs. We record them at 1280 pixels by 800 to give a large on-screen video. Well, you can see that from what you're watching here. The disc for PC users will be self-booting and will operate from structured menus. Mac users will need to access the tutorial content folder, but everything will be in a numbered order. We've placed the videos in a numbered, logical order on the disc, and our advice is that you watch the videos in the order they are presented, especially on the first run through. You should have no difficulty playing our videos, but if you do experience any at all, we do recommend a free video player that we now use all of the time. It's called VLC Media Player and can be downloaded from the internet, and it does seem to play everything without any annoying searches on the internet for codecs. It's easy to find via Google and easy to install. Our MP4 videos can also be synchronized with your iPad, so you can watch our videos at any time when you're on the move too. We hope you enjoy the disc.